I'll be going down some pretty fascinating rabbit holes this morning, chatting to ChatGPT. I wanted to put my money where my mouth is when I was saying learning about tradition and history and do it a little bit more. Because in school, I was just a little shit, adamant on destruction and chaos in the classroom. But so I started learning more about the Druids and some inherited lineage. And I grew up on an island called Anglesey, which is the big island of. So in 60 AD, there was the Battle of Anglesey, also known as the Battle of Menai, which is interesting, man, because Menai Bridge is where I grew up. I've got a bit of a weird relationship with the Menai Bridge because that's where I lost a really fucking good friend. But it's basically like the Romans invaded, and there was this big battle, this big bloody battle that ensued, and a lot of we put up a good fight, but ultimately the Druids were overcome. It was like it's called the last battle of the Druids, the last stand of the Druids, and their culture was knocked down. And there were still some Druids that survived, but the culture was ultimately knocked down. But it was interesting because then I started going down some rabbit holes learning about Druids and their connection and their value system and stuff like that. And it's super interesting because it just echoes my own without me even knowing or having to dip my toes in that water. There were just so many points of relatability that I found now, which is super fucking interesting considering I'm relatively new to exploring this world. It's almost like inherited values from some sort of innate primal source rather than a place of learning. But yeah, so the Druids were very focused on being mediators between opposing schools of thought, trying to settle debates peacefully and trying to use their wisdom to try and basically stop conflict and bring it to peace in a way that uses words, that uses mediation, that uses common sense, and finding common ground. And they were also very strong believers of homeostasis and symbiotic relationship to nature, and kind of seeing yourself as part of nature and using that philosophy to guide your actions in so that you're not destructive in the way that you interact with the world, the way that you operate with the world. It's kind of honouring that homeostasis, which, by the way, is integral for our survival. It just is. To think otherwise is ignorant. It's the law of equivalent exchange. If you take, you've got to learn how to give back, because otherwise, if you take all the cookies, eventually the cookie aren't in the jar anymore, so to speak. If you're not replenishing the jar, a very simplified metaphor for how we operate here on Earth. But anyway, yeah, man, it made me proud. It made me even more proud to be Welsh, to dig into all this stuff, you know? Yeah, just an interesting little tangent. By the way, ChatGPT is so good for just fucking... I've just started doing it all the time. I just chat away to it for hours sometimes, and I feel like I'm filling my brain with good stuff because it just knows everything. Long live the cyborg revolution, man. But yeah, I just thought I would share that with the world. Right, an ADHD tangent extrapolation from inside the space pod, right? So I was thinking even more, right? So the Roman Empire were largely responsible for the eradication of the Druids, right? They were also responsible for killing that Jesus bloke who, whether or not you're religious or not, there's historical evidence that he was indeed a real person, and whether or not you believe in the miracles, he's reportedly a bit of a lad, you know, a bit of a nice fella. And they were also largely responsible for the eradication of a lot of spiritual or religious practices which valued peace and nature more than expansion, like paganism. And they led to the stigmatization of things like paganism to associate it with the occult and witchcraft in a satanic sort of way, rather than what it actually stood for, which was, again, symbiosis, much like the Druids, honouring the natural world and nurturing that relationship. So the Roman Empire starts sweeping the world like wildfire, right? And a lot of these more ancient values are replaced by more imperialist values, like expansion and growth, progress in an economic sense. And the imperialist value system is kind of at the core of capitalism, really. And it's interesting to me because a lot of these older value systems were based on the awe and the relationship with the natural world, the sun and the moon, the night and the day, and all of these sorts of things like that, right? And it's interesting to me because I feel like our new value system and our new religion is kind of based with that imperialist
mentality, even in our personal lives. Like, we don't feel good enough unless we feel like we've expanded in an economic sense, that we've made a good life for me and our family by just collecting resources. I've got to collect as many resources as possible, because that will be what defines me as a successful, achieved human being in this life. And it's a double-edged sword, because those value systems have also led to some pretty amazing innovation, medically, scientifically, technologically. But it could supposedly be argued that if those innovations were rooted more so in a value system that did honour homeostasis with the natural world, and that did honour people and our peaceful relationship with each other, with one another, they would have come about anyway. They may even be better. You don't know, unless you see a parallel dimension where those things are true. But anyway, the point is that if our way of being, our way of thinking, our way of interacting with the world comes from this system that was kind of hell-bent on just eradicating people, preaching, really at the core of it, love, peace, respect for one another, it makes you wonder if we're slightly misguided on our path as human beings. And remember that how we operate in the world, it's not the laws of physics. It's not like gravity. If I jump, I have to fall down. Everything, the way that we interact, our thought patterns and stuff, it's dictated by ideas. Capitalism, imperialism, socialism, communism, anarchy, all of these, they're all ideas, and they're just kind of rooted at the heart of our innate drives and our instincts, and they're shaped somewhat. I would argue that we are masters of our nature, because some people just say, it's human nature, we'll always revert to these things, we'll always revert to greed, we'll always revert to these, it's nature. I'd argue that we are masters of our nature to a large degree, which is what separates humans from a lot of other creatures on this planet. Like, we don't give in to primal instincts and tear each other apart or fuck each other on the streets, because we know that, that would be socially unacceptable. So, to a large degree, we are masters of our nature. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that we are also masters of the value systems that we have, and we can shape them in ways that leads to more happiness and more sustainability and better community and just a better feeling of belonging. Like, we are in some of the most economically successful countries on earth, in the West, and we also have some of the highest rates of depression, which is a strange correlation. You would have thought that with more economic growth and expansion and success comes happiness, and ultimately, really, what matters at the end of the day is that we feel happy, content, like we're enough, like we're fulfilled, like life is beautiful, like life is an adventure to explore. We don't want to feel suppressed, or like we just have to do things that we don't want to do because that's just the way of the world. That's up to us to invent that. That's up to us to change that. And we can change that, because we're incredibly, incredibly powerful creatures. And sometimes, I think, I'll just summarise it with one more point, and I think that learning is sometimes a forgetting, which sounds like a contradictory statement, but I think that learning is sometimes an unlearning. Like ancient civilizations like the Mayan people or the Egyptians, who were credited with amazing achievements despite their lack of technology at the time, they had a very close relationship with nature and the sun and the moon and the stars and the day at night, and they were mystified by the awe of it. And then science came along, and we tried to explain every single thing down to the atomic molecule, which I think is a brilliant thing, obviously, because it helps progresses in ways, but in some ways, when you remove that awe and wonder of the world, you start behaving in a way that is more separated. And I honestly think the truth is, there was a lot of truth in those value systems back in the day, that we are all of the same source, we are all the same thing. And it's not like this hippie, we're all the same, we're all equal, man, but it's more like we are different strokes of the same paintbrush, so to speak. There are differences, but they're beautiful, man. And I think that behaving accordingly, where I see myself as an extension of you, you see yourself as an extension of me, doesn't mean we have to agree, doesn't mean that we don't even fight sometimes, right? But because that happens in nature, right? But if all the decisions that we make as a people, as a society, are for the benefit of the hive, for the greater good of, rather than just the benefit of me and my own expansion and my own economic dominance, I genuinely think this world would be a much better place to be, and we'd feel a lot more satiated, we'd feel a lot more satisfied, we'd feel a lot happier. And that responsibility is just a decision, because some people think, well, you can't, it takes all this, but it is simply just a collective decision from everyone. And I truly believe the technology that we could invent with that at the core value, the science, the medicine, everything would be exponentially better than what we have now. And, you know, it's bittersweet because that power is just a decision. That's all it is. It's just a decision.